replies. We like civility. We're trying something different this time with written questions. She will read the question. She will read your name and address, and we ask you to stand so everybody sees you if they don't recognize your name. And you get to ask one question. It will be read, and then she will go over the complete guideline as to how long anyone has to answer the question. And now over to Ina.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Maggie, and the Pelham Weekly for sponsoring this debate and giving people an opportunity to know the candidates and the issues. We drew lots in order to determine the order of who gives the opening statement and who gives the closing statement. We'll go backwards for the closing statement. But first, I will read the rules. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement, and at closing time, you will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. There is a timekeeper. Is there a timekeeper? Okay. And she will be letting you know when 30 seconds and then 30 seconds to go and then stop.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Questions may be directed to all the candidates, or you may address one candidate in particular. But the questioner can also ask the others to answer. A candidate's answer will be limited to 2 minutes. If the 2 minutes are not used, the balance of the 2 minutes can go to another candidate of his choice or her choice to finish answering. Questions must pertain to issues that are in the jurisdiction of the Village Board of Trustees. I can disallow any questions that are not appropriate. Only residents of the Village of Pelham can ask questions. As Maggie explained, we're going to index card, which is being done increasingly to speed up the question answer period and to keep questions fair and distributed. And there will be screen for speech. We don't do speeches at this point. Which simply you have a question to ask, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions that you can ask. Okay, I'm going to introduce the candidates in the order in which they will be speaking. The first speaker will be Jean Ippolito. The second will be Joe Marty. Third will be Christopher Ream. Ream, I have that right.
Yes.
Okay, and fourth, David Brown, and 5, Adam Caglin. So we'll start 1 minute, for opening statements, starting with Jean.
I'd like to thank Maggie for having this, as well as your being here. It's great. And everyone here, thank you for being here. Over the past 18 years, I have been proud to work with fellow Pelhamites, including members of the Newcomers Club, the Junior League, Colonial School PTA, Colonial School Building Committee, the Board of Ed, and Pelham Community Rowing Association. Who can forget that unbearably hot Saturday in early June of 1999, when fathers and mothers, public officials, and private companies from all over Pelham and Pelham Manor descended upon 6th Street Playground and in one day created the wonder that is now Julienne's Playground. It is a testament to the caliber of people who choose to call Pelham their home. My path to seeking your vote as trustee has been 16 years in the making, inspired by community projects just like Julienne's Playground. As one who has spent the majority of those years involved in community-driven causes, I understand that the reason you speak at trustee meetings or express frustration by writing letters to the paper is because you care passionately about Pelham, and you want to be part of the solution.
Will be Joe Marty.
Okay, thank you. Again, thank you to the Pelham Weekly, and thank you for Ina for chairing this. I'm Joe Marty. I've been on the board for 4 years. I've lived in Pelham Village for 8 years. I am married to Beth Fooey and have a son in Pelham High. I've been on the board. I've been through, I've really sort of relished the experience on the board since I'm a bit of a public policy person, and I like this. I mean, I've gone through 4 budgets, thousands of pages of zoning code, which probably doesn't sound thrilling, but it's how you make change happen. And I've sat in numerous board meetings and also, led committee hearings that actually made some difference. I'm especially, with all that experience, I'm especially proud of a couple of things. One was this is one I haven't completed, but we're taking a look at zoning. Zoning is really important in a community like this, and it's important to make it modern, make it reflect the kind of village we want to live in. Second was I worked with a large committee, a committee that was pretty disparate and very, very distinct, and it was about the one that reopened the Young Avenue green space. Finally, I just helped renegotiate the garbage contract. Proud of that. So glad to do this.
Oh, stop.
Yes.
Okay,
I didn't
I'm
see that until the
sorry.
end. Sorry.
Okay, number 3 will be Christopher Ream.
Thanks. No, thank you to all of you for being here tonight. I'm Chris Ream. I hope that my comments will be helpful as you make your decision coming into this election. We all know Pelham is a wonderful community and a great place to live, a healthy place to raise a family. When we talk in this campaign and use the term maintaining all that we value about Pelham, we should always be open and honest about the ways in which Pelham is slowly changing. We lose too many older families here in the community after their kids graduate because their taxes are high. I think that's something that needs to change, and I feel that that's a loss of continuity for this community. My wife Colleen and I are here for the long term, and that's why I'm running. It's not just an idle sentiment from us when we say that we want our child to grow up here in the same healthy environment that Pelham's known for generations. Maintaining that takes real work. I want to do the work it takes to help maintain that. I've been involved over the last several years with the Pelham Civics, and I look forward to being involved with Pelham Rec in the future in coaching and in Colonial School. You're going to hear a lot from us tonight on different issues, but I ask you to pay attention to 3 key priorities if you can.
Okay, stop. Okay.
Pardon me.
Okay, next will be David Brown.
The name of the TV show that's being filmed outside is Believe. If you want to help Pelham tonight, besides being here, go home and watch the show at 10 o'clock on NBC or DVR it to get the numbers up so they come back and film. And this is the kind of revenue that we need to get back in the village at some point. NBC, 10 o'clock, Believe. Everybody got that? Great. My name is David Brown. I'm running for trustee. Have lived in Pelham since 1992, moving into Chester Park. I've served on multiple community activities in the past 20 years. This is the latest venture because, again, want to help with the fiscal situation of the village, which is pretty serious right now. The one thing I have done into the run-up of the election is spent lots of time with the budget, a fresh view of things, and some education from the sitting trustees. We'll talk about it later. Thanks.
Okay, and finally, Adam Caglin.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Adam Kagan, and I'm running because I'd like to see Pelham continue to prosper. We have some tough decisions to make, and I want them made by a balanced, experienced board. I think a trustee's, they can hear me, trust me. I think a trustee's job is to seek answers and ask questions to set a clear direction for the village. As the mayor knows, I value thoroughness. I ask a lot of questions, and yes, government can take a frustratingly long time sometimes. But I believe it's the trustee's job to invest the time required to ask the questions to reach the best outcome. I've lived in Pelham for 5.5 years with my wife Melissa and our children, Henry and Josie. Hi guys, it's almost bedtime. In my spare time I coach baseball. I advise on second grade homework if I can. And before I was a trustee, I was a baseball coach in the village and I served a year on the planning board. Please return me to the board so that I can finish the work that has been begun on the transfer of the water system and the revised telecommunications law. And I'd like to continue to use my experience on future issues facing the village. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think I've mentioned, and most of you probably know this, that there are 5 candidates for 3 positions. So three people will be elected to the board. Okay, our first question. This is from Jean Pinda, 45 Washington in Pelham. And the question to David Brown is, You promoted ending the rear yard pickup of trash and are going to curbside pickup to save money, but then backed off that. Why did you change?
I didn't promote the rear yard. I promoted the full discussion of rear yard pickup and also promoted several other things heading into the RFP, which were really barely brought up into the RFP process. One of which was, should we go to once per week pickup in the winter months when we didn't have to worry about rodents, when people generally produce less trash for January through March, was one of the sort of other creative suggestions I put up for that. That was really never entered into the process. So no, I said we should take a hard look at it. It was over $200,000 a year of savings. Given the fact that we pay $515,000 per year in debt servicing, $200,000 is a very meaningful amount of money to take a look at.
Okay, thank you. And I guess we don't ask anyone else. Okay. I hope it's just a matter of fact to let you know that New Rochelle would dream of rear yard pickup. We have to drag our garbage to the curb, but that's just a statement of fact. Okay, Robert Keller.
Robert Keller, stand please.
Wolf's Lane. Okay. Question, Candidate Brown, what is your view on the Carroll Avenue Clovely parking agreement in which trustee Marty voted yes, allowing parking 24/7 on their side of Carroll and no to people parking at night on the other side of Carroll?
I've been to a lot of trustee meetings over the past year sitting on that side rather than this side, and have been to many of them regarding the Carroll Avenue parking, and had some conversations about it over the years and been informed on things. I would say that I thought it was a unfair deal, and it creates a lot of emotional stress for some people, not just the woman that mainly speaks at the meetings. And whatever it takes to go back and take a hard look at that negotiation and renegotiate, I would do that if added to the board.
Okay, thank you. And the next question?
I don't know exactly who this is for, but
Okay, Amy, Anna,
Amy Kaplan.
Amy Kaplan, 203 Cliff. You'd like them all to answer? Okay, assuming that,
Start with Marty and Kaplan, who are now on the board.
okay,
And
Marty.
Kagan.
And Kaplan.
Kagan.
Kagan.
Or Adam, whichever
That's
is
right.
easier.
Okay.
That's right. Just start.
Assuming that the lawsuit against Extranet and the village is resolved in favor of the plaintiffs, how would you handle a reapplication by Extranet to site the DAS antenna in the residential area of Pelham Heights or any part of Pelham? Okay, I think it will be directed to Marty, to Marty and Adam Kagan, and you want everyone to answer that. Okay, we'll start with.
Would you? I sometimes cede to the people who know this better, Amy, if you would agree, and if I'm going to cede to Adam since Adam has spent more time working on this, but I would gladly answer second.
You understand you have 2 minutes to answer questions, so I guess Adam has a little
Okay.
extra time.
Thank you. Thanks for asking the question, Amy. To give a little bit of context, last year the communications company pressed the village to put up 4 antennas on existing and some new poles in the village. The village's outdated telecommunications code at the time didn't give us the tools that we really needed to push back on this kind of installation. So unfortunately, this matter is subject to pending litigation, so I'm a little bit limited in what I can say about it. But I think the question is that, what would we do if the court returns a verdict in your favor, and what law would we apply? Well, we hope to apply the new law that we've put up on the website. I've spent 4 months working with our village council, our village attorney, and our outside counsel. We think that the new draft of the law takes advantage of every legal tool that there is available. Unfortunately, though, we are limited in the things that we can do. So I think that the best answer is that we would have to take a look at it again, hopefully under the lens of the new law, and apply the tools that we can.
Okay, and why don't we go back where it started with Christopher, and if you want to answer?
Well, absolutely. You know, it is a complex question, and a really important point to make first is that Adam's technical expertise has been incredibly valuable in getting through this. I can imagine any small village having this level of a complex issue is very often not staffed with someone who would really have, or have someone on the board really, who would have this level of expertise. That's a very unfortunate thing, a very fortunate thing, excuse me. And so it should not be overlooked by anyone that this level of expertise is why we're asking to see him reelected, of course, along with us. In terms of where we can go, that law had, the way it was crafted, believed at the time that it perceived what would cover all the issues, and it didn't. So what has been changed, again, perceives as best it can looking forward. But what we do understand is that it will be much harder. We should all have the expectation that it will be much harder for that to happen. There are no guarantees, but that is the work of the board, is to stay on top of that and to stay on top of other communities and how they address it, to learn from those.
Okay, yeah.
Same thing. Thanks, Adam, for all the time and work you've done at both in the past and prospectively. In terms of those nodes, I've actually been thinking about it, and I have a couple of thoughts. One was, why wasn't that thing put up closer to the train tracks, farther into Pelham Heights? Or why wasn't a community church of Pelham's given the opportunity to sort of rent that space and put it up there, where we spend the summer up in Maine? Several of the churches in difficult financial situations have chosen to have those nodes on their steeples, or off their steeples. So that's a kind of sort of alternate viewpoint I would have brought from the very beginning. Also, for example, when we were at the trustee meeting this week, and the first hint that the next hearing would come out on the 19th took place, the first thing I did was I texted, not you, Amy, because I didn't have your number, but I texted Matt Carey, Heidi's husband, said, pass it on to you. Then it made it into Maggie's paper. So that kind of communication, that kind of creative thinking, when this thing settles out, besides the new legislation that's going to have to go in place, this is the kind of stuff we're going to have to do.
May I have a moment to answer some of those questions?
Let's give Jean a chance to.
I've had the opportunity to speak to you a bit, Amy, about this. And I think the bottom line is, what's important here is that there was a lack of communication on many levels. And I applaud Mr. Kagan for all that he's doing now, but I look at the two sitting, the incumbents, and they were here when all of that took place. And so I think that it's important to realize that with fresh eyes coming into this, hopefully we'll be able to better address some of the concerns that you had as a parent, your concerns about safety, all that kind of thing that should have happened the first go around.
Okay, and you have it, you can make a short response.
Is that really part of the rules, that we can
Yes,
now
it is.
respond?
You made an assertion that I think he has
Yeah,
a right to.
if it calls for
Okay,
a
well,
response.
that's different than,
The rule, it's, it's some, let's see, I can read it to you.
Let's
But
go
anyhow.
okay, but
Okay,
you understand what
Yes,
you're doing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
it's-
Okay,
the
that's fine, because
response-
now we're all going to be able to refute assertions, right?
Right.
Okay,
It's
good.
clarification.
Exactly.
Okay. The assertion that communication wasn't made is,
Not the communication, the
which assertion would you like me to address?
No, it's the assertion that you want to, it's the assertion that you
Okay.
want to address.
The rules are, if there's a need for a brief response, you're entitled to
Okay,
do
with
one.
regard to why wasn't it placed on top of a church or an alternative location?
Yes.
We can do
that's
that
the
one.
assertion.
Okay. Why it wasn't the telecom, the Extenet, which is this telecom provider, they determined that that they have to determine that a substantial gap exists in coverage and that this is the least intrusive place to put this technology. This technology is unfortunately, the size of a coffee can. It sits on top of a utility pole. It's designed to be a low-power antenna. Putting it by the train tracks, which is, I think, a good place for it, is not this kind of technology. That's the monopole technology, the 150-foot tall, tower that covers the whole neighborhood. That's not this technology. So it was explored. We did ask the question, but we weren't able to do that. We weren't able to move them off of that position.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next question. Okay, the questioner is Neil Gallo at 2 Pell Street in Pelham.
Place.
To Pelham Place, okay. Okay. Pelham needs to attract entrepreneurship and business to compete with other communities in the area to help keep taxes down. I better put my glasses on this, or or lower. We need entrepreneurship and business to compete with other communities in the area and to help keep taxes down or lower them. How would you approach this issue? Okay, that's question one. And
No,
that,
that's question one, so let's start.
Okay,
Start
and-
with Jane.
okay, we'll start with Jane, and I guess we'll go all down the row.
Okay. I believe that there are a lot actually, from going from door to door, a lot of people in this village who have the expertise needed to pull together a community, to talk about how to attract entrepreneurial possibilities. With my experience as an architect and my training and how I typically work through problems, I would look forward to trying to work with this group and lead this group in the proper direction.
What was your name again? Neil Gallo. Neil Gallo? Okay, so Neil, you're the first person on the committee, if I'm trustee, to start talking about how we can actually do this for more than just me sitting here at the table with a 2-minute
Great.
time frame. But I think you're right about it, and as we've done all this sort of discussion about preparing for the debate and everything, and we've looked into new, modern, new age things that are going on out there to bring livelihoods and activity into the village. I've spent some time looking at what's called well-being real estate, which is something along those lines. There's a company called Delos, for example, that tries to build these sort of new healthy living, smaller family size, single occupants or something like that. And that's one of the first things I came up with is something like that. And what it takes is about 10 of us to do the same thing, come up with a bunch of ideas, and first of all, see who in town can do that, and start going out there and seeing what we can pull in. You're absolutely right.
Neil, thank you for the question. In fact, I've put most of my career in entrepreneurship, mostly funding it as a venture capitalist, and as well with the National Association I'm with now is about economic development for communities, primarily through encouraging investment in jobs and entrepreneurship for communities. Your question is very much what every community asks. If you want to talk about entrepreneurship in any community, wealthy, poor, you start with what you have. We have entrepreneurs here. What are we doing to make the businesses that are here as successful as we can?
That's right.
What do we do to help the retailers that are here? Success breeds success. So let's focus on what we have. We know we're a wonderful bedroom community very close to the city. The resources, the attractiveness is here. The fact that there aren't more businesses located is a function of its own limitations as a small community. But let's be successful with what we have. I mean, that's not a complete answer. But I think when we do that well, it becomes more obvious why others would want to say, we'd be right outside the city, a little more affordable, and look what we can do with our business from here.
Thanks. A couple. I think the focusing on the businesses we have here is a great idea. Neil, thank you for the question. The first is we should make doing business easier for people that are already here, permitting easier. I mean, I think the board is already doing a pretty good job, thanks to Joe Sinersha, for I think we're calling it A-frame boards, but the idea is make it easier for companies for people who are trying to sell, to have a little advertisement out front, spruce up the streetscape. Second is, let's give incentives. 3 or 4 years ago, in the last administration, we sought funding, got funding for a 50-50 funding for facade approval. If you fix your facade, you spend 100%, we'll give you 50% from here. It was a grant. We made good use of it, and there's a number of stores that improve. So making that work really helps. Third is finding and recruiting a niche. I mean, the old idea was a niche, rather. Art. Antiques were a great idea. A number of villages had this idea. Let's make this the antique hub. Well, that's been around. But there are new things in the age of Twitter and Facebook where you may be able to come up with something that is both attractive. You can actually attract people to come here, and it doesn't require huge amounts of space. And Pelham might be very, very amenable to something like that. And finally, I think there's, you can't miss the fact that there's an empty piece of property to the left of us, and regardless of what anybody might do, the owner may approach the board and the planning board and the ZBA that David's on and come up with an idea. I think, we should be open about this, remembering the lessons we learned in the last election which is, development of this town has got to be, it has to have minimal impact on students and schools. It has a minimal impact on social services, and it's going to have a reasonably broad support in the community to work. But, that would be part of any development, I think, that any part of downtown help that you're talking about.
Thank you, by the way, Mr. Gallo. One of the things that I'm struck by that we're missing is, an incubator. It seems like we have, there were great buildings at the foot of the bridge, and then up at the top up by Chester Park, the Sanborn Map Building should have been great incubator spaces for these small businesses. And small businesses, they, as they get closer together, the room between them is it's not friction, but the space between them sparks ideas and creativity. And they need to be next to each other, and there should be an incubator and a place for that, and we don't have that. And I don't know of one in southern Westchester. So I like the idea of encouraging small businesses to get neighborly and provide them a space to do so.
Okay. The next question is from Jim Grossvenner, 149 Harmon Avenue. Okay. I know you have worked. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's for Mr. Ream. I know you have worked this past year to develop support for shared services with the manor. What would you do about merging the villages?
Well, thank you, Jim. I think that's a question that's been on all our minds for a long time and is going to be on our minds for a long time. But at its simplest, this is a decision for two different communities in the first place, and we know that. But it is an important one for both communities. If we step back and we think about how we spend on our biggest two items, on police and fire, we already know how much we're virtually shared services. It's just as likely to be a manor car that backs up a Pelham police car. We know we send our fire trucks over probably more often maybe even than the manor does. We have many lessons from other communities not far from us that have done very well in reasonably and appropriately managing how they share services. And I make that point because that's different than actually merging, which we should say is about consolidating governments. I don't think that's a bridge we need to cross for a while. Let's understand, or if ever perhaps, that might not be something people want to talk about. But if we don't look at long-term planning, which in particular thinks about how and why we can merge services or share services, we're not ever really going to make the big unit root differences on our budget we need. Think about a couple $100,000 difference alone in savings in the fire department and what that could do to giving us more options to protect the quality of services we like.
Okay, is there a disagreement, brief argument against?
Do I have to make an assertion, or we can just?
Well, it's a little bit of a,
We can comment.
You can make a comment if you disagree.
Chris has got it exactly
Word is
right.
briefly,
Chris
so-
has got it exactly right in terms of the component of the budget that police and fire take up. It's almost 50%, and then if you add in the benefits and pension, it's
80.
It's about 80. So he's thinking exactly the right place. And planning is a good idea, but really what it's all about is the present and how are we going to do it right here, right now, over the next couple of years. And not to spoil my big finish, but there's real motivation to do so. So couldn't agree more.
Okay. I think this is work, this comments are working. This is from Ed Dory, 15.
Doty.
D-O-T-Y, at 15 Oak Avenue. Okay. Mr. Marty and Mr. Kagan, why did you talk to New Rochelle 2 years ago about merging our fire departments? Why would you put Pelham Village jobs at risk? Okay, you can, either one of you can start.
May I start? I was fire liaison when that started. I was fire liaison briefly for when Greg Breskin left the board, so I've dealt with that. There had been a proposal from a third party that had worked with New Rochelle and knew us and said, there may be a possibility of sharing services. And so it's a direct extension of what David and Chris were both talking about. It was, right off the bat, it was risky. There are people who are uncomfortable about sharing services. I wanted two models here. I'm hoping that when we move forward and we look at sharing services in the future, we could at least learn a little bit from this. One was we started slowly, but then we began communicating. We talked to the union chief. We talked to the firemen. We involved them. We involved Chief Stone down at the firehouse. The board was fully engaged on this. We shared. We talked about it. We did research externally to find out how we might make this work, because it's complicated. I am really proud that we went after that. It is savings that we need. But I'm also proud that because we talked to the right people and we did hard analysis, we discovered that the savings would not have been worth the loss of flexibility and the loss of assurance that this Pelham would be safe. It's a big village, a small village, big city, and that alone caused some of this problems. But it made me more interested in doing this again with villages that are more our size and it was more compatible.
Okay, Adam?
In the interest of time, let's move on to another question. I think you hit that one out of the park, so
Okay,
I don't need to head to that one.
okay.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. This is from Tim Cassidy, 150 Corona Avenue. Okay. You've lived in
That
Pelham.
was for Chris.
Oh, for Chris Ring. Okay. You have lived in Pelham for 3 years. After last year's election, you went to one budget meeting. Aside from being in the Civics Association, what have you done for our community?
Well, thank you, Mayor, for asking. And I should make a point that I have no intention of trying to grandstand in front of budget meetings or excuse me, even board meetings in the course of that time. I don't think that was appropriate for me to do that. And so I have kept up with these meetings, as many of our neighbors do, on TV. I've also had a good opportunity to talk alongside with Joe and Adam as well on the progress of how this board is doing its work. A number of things I've done. Thank you for mentioning the civics. Well, anyone here who isn't fully aware of Pelham Civics, please become so. Everyone knows what good they do and what a heartbeat it is for the community. I have had a great opportunity to learn about the community through that. In terms of not only knocking on doors last year and hearing about what people are concerned about, I've had a chance to do it all over again this year. Lucky me for that. If at first you don't succeed, I'm okay with trying again. In the course of this past year, I've had a number of different conversations, primarily about what I just mentioned, which is shared services. I think we have to have some ability to change the dialogue, or at least get it back on the table about how to talk to the manor intelligently in a way that understands their concerns along with ours and look for savings. And then in addition, I have talked, and I came to a meeting shortly after the last election about the budget to try to raise the questions about what can we do to look longer term so we don't have to use things like fund balance to make tax cap.
Okay.
This is from Tim.
Oh, okay. This is from Roger McDaniel, 221 Highbrook Avenue. And the question is for Joe or Adam, either one of you. Let's see. Basements or yards on 6th, a basement and yards on 6th and 7th Avenues get flooded in every major rainstorm. What are you doing to fix that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I think most people, especially those of us who've walked over the neighborhoods recently, know how how hilly it is in the 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, 8th, 9th Avenues in the village. They have consistently, I believe, for the last 60 to 70 years, I'll ask John Cassone perhaps, have been longer than that. They've been having flooding for as long as you can remember. Every large rain, it drains water out of the lake, the Glenwood Lake in Rochelle. It flows down and it floods houses. I mean, every single large rain, sometimes twice in a summer. It's a horrible thing. And the previous administration did a very good job of going and finding grants from the federal government. So one was, some was state, some were federal, that helped ameliorate it. They had to be matched, and we'll come back to that in a second. We have to come up with it. But it was good planning, good resourceful banging on federal government doors to get the money. We now have funding for 2 parts of it. It's really a 6 or 7 part process, but good planning went into that. The first one is an easy and a relative no-brainer. It's the end of the pipe as it goes into Hutchinson. We got a significant amount of money to make that happen. It will make all the water flow more quickly because it increases capacity. The choice we have to make on the board is whether we come up with our own funding to fund that. It's not free. It's like normal things. There's a federal matching grant to it. I am strongly in favor of at least finding the long-term money, i.e., considering some borrowing to fix a 80 to 100-year-old problem in Pelham for North Pelham.
The only thing that I would add to that, since I think the question was directed at both of us, was that there were some proactive measures we've been able to take. The previous mayor worked out an understanding with the city of New Rochelle, where when we know the storm is coming, we ask them and they lower Glenwood Lake so that it provides a little bit of extra capacity at the top, so it doesn't flood quite as quickly. The other thing that we should all be aware of is that these grants take time. We've received 2. We have 2 more, I think, that are still pending. We received 2 of the grants. We went out and bid out a project in the fall, and we weren't happy with the numbers that we came back with, and we decided that we were going to rebid the project in the spring, and hopefully we're able to begin on the bottom leg of the project when we have some new bids in the spring.
Okay, you have
My follow-up question to the 2 sitting trustees is,
Are we asking follow-up questions? I thought he was
my
doing
follow-up
comments.
assertion to the 2, what's the rule?
Make a statement. Go ahead.
So 2011, the village took on 1.9 million in debt.
That's a different question, I believe, Maggie.
Okay. So you just
Do you
want to make that point?
want to comment, David, on whether you're for or against adding to the debt for this project?
The village has $3.6 million in debt for a $13 million annual budget before capital outlays. It's $515,000 per year that we spend on interest payments this year. From the 1.9 million in 2011, we have a new village yard, but we have flooding on 7th Avenue. Joe, you were part of the vote that approved that. That's what needs to be said.
I'd be
Okay,
glad to
so-
answer a very different question, which David raised, and so I've responded.
Not to mention
It's-
2 new fire trucks, excuse me, I
I
forgot
think it would
about
be in the
that.
interest of clarity.
Absolutely,
if you
absolutely.
go forward.
We'll go forward. David's talking about, we have not yet borrowed money to address the flooding in North Pelham. And then that's what we were speaking to, and we feel like that's definitely worth considering, and especially the first part of it, I think is a relatively straightforward matter. Debt, like long-term debt, is the smart way of doing something that has a 50, 60, 80, 90-year lifestyle. The lifespan. You know this, David, but that's why you take out bonded debt. Means you borrow it, and people in the future pay for it. Because why should all of a sudden the people in 2014 pay for the entire work that has to be done to fix an 80 or 100-year-old problem? Dave's talking about another issue, which was the debt that came down in 2011. We were faced with a problem with our Department of Public Works yard. It's the yard in back of Rockwell's. It was beyond decrepit. It was unsafe. It was out of code, and it was polluting the Hutchinson River. It was bad news. We'd been warned several times that several parts of it were going to cause serious problems. We had a grant that was, again, the administration had gone out, sought a federal grant for $1 million, and it was expiring. So we had a choice. Do we fix this problem now and use $1 million of federal grant money, or do we give in and fix, keep throwing $102,000 at this problem in the back? The mayor and the board decided, to take a look. We got a bid, and we went forward. We went forward with the large project that built the DPW yard. Here's what came out of building the DPW yard that's long-term and continues to give value to the village. One is we got a working DPW yard, Department of Public Works yard. It's clean, it doesn't pollute the Hutchinson River, and it's safe. It gained 43 revenue-generating parking spots, which give $40,000 to $60,000 a year in revenue to this village. That's forever. Forever we get that money. And finally, it enabled better development possibilities for the empty Wolf's Lane property, the Wolf's Lane property.
Okay, I think have we clarified what the issue is?
I would keep going, but I feel like that's against
Let's try something else.
Okay, we'll go on. I think people do understand what the issue is, and I hope there will be other ways to
Okay,
communicate.
Susan.
Okay, Susan Muty, 62 Highbrook. Question, this is to Jean. What was your involvement in the Colonial School expansion?
Basically, what happened was the principal came to me and told me that they were talking about adding 2 portable classrooms to Colonial Playground as a way to manage the overcrowding. I felt it was very important that we go to the community, to the Colonial community, and explain what the long-term ramifications were of that. And if that's what they decided to do, that would be fine. But I had a meeting with all of the people at Colonial, and we discussed different options. And based upon that, I sketched up several plans, and we sent it back to the community to decide what they thought they'd be interested in. And we took those concerns and those ideas to the Board of Ed, and they decided that they would entertain the idea of an addition. So then it went through the whole process of going through the bond, and that's how we ended up with the addition at Colonial and more space on the playground.
Okay, I think we can go on to another question. This is from Everett Spiros, 42 Linden Avenue, and it's to Joe Marty. Why should families and seniors support you when you have repeatedly voted to increase taxes?
Okay.
Joe, that's for you.
I wanted to hear, I thought there was more coming.
This is a
I'm sure it's not only seniors and others who are complaining about raising taxes. Everybody in this village bears the weight of increased taxes. I suspect that since I voted for a small tax increases in the last round in the years previous, I suspect he's talking about earlier years. I'll make that assumption. This village 3 to 4 years ago hit the absolute fiscal perfect storm. The recession, along with the recession, we had incredible increases in pension costs. They went up. The pension costs that we pay for the fire, police, and DPW people that work for us, along with that, there were 12, 13, 15% increases in healthcare costs. It was a tsunami that overwhelmed not just this village, but every other village around us. And everybody had to deal with that. And they did. It's not something you could plan around. We're talking about, for example, within 4 years, pension costs went from about $650,000 a year to $1.39 million a year. That's not something you can't save for that. It's pretty hard to adjust to that. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm proud of the efforts at the time that we took to rein in spending of the part that we could control. We reduced the DPW manning, both union and non-union. We didn't, with agreement of the police department, we didn't replace 1 to 2 empty police positions that were made empty only because of attrition. We held non-personnel expense flat, which is just personnel that involves health and pension is uncontrollable. That you have to pay that. We held non-personnel expenses flat for that period. At the same time, the income that we count on besides property tax fell. It's non-tax property. It's a long question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, this is from Joe Bidwell, John Bidwell, 69,
Bidwell,
what avenue is this? Young Avenue?
Young.
Young Avenue, and this is for Joe Marty again, and the question is, at the beginning of last year, you were given the responsibility of proposing zoning changes. After the problems with the proposed Fifth Avenue project, what changes should be proposed?
Thank you. That's a good idea. I think a recognition and a proposal, maybe. The recognition is that in the last election it was pretty clear people were uncomfortable about higher density in certain parts of the village. Message received. I think. But the other thing that came out, and one of the things I would like to do if reelected and could work on zoning again, several things. One is to modernize the zoning code. Building is a little different than it was before. First floors are larger or taller than they used to be. And if you look around at a new building, they tend to be taller. But we have height limits that sometimes don't allow that. We're talking about a difference of maybe 2 or 3 feet. It's not huge. It doesn't allow another floor. That's one of the things we discovered when we looked at this. But one of the things I was disappointed with when I asked the mayor to begin working on this again was we really hadn't spent time looking at green zoning, i.e. putting in incentives for an insulation, putting in real incentives in code that enforces people to put in better windows. I mean, I would like for Len Russo to be telling somebody, no, you can't go buy those cheap windows. That's not code. There's a lot of good zoning that makes sense. It's affordable, and if you buy a house in a neighborhood that has that kind of zoning, it has more value because it's green and it has value. Finally, there are other smart zoning approaches that can drive the business you want, can drive improve business downtown. That's what I want to go after.
Okay, next question for Joe Marty, and this is from
Make that
Ed
small time.
Hotchkiss at 45 Young. Glad we saved money on the garbage contract, but why didn't the board go all the way and accept curbside pickup and save a lot of money?
I think the board can be proud. I'm proud of having at least marshaled a process that put a lot of options out there, got real bids on them, aired out the options, and had really good, full public discussion. Early on, I have to give credit to Robert Emuter, the village administrator. He did a good job. I worked with him, but he did a good job of laying out what had happened in the past. I worked with him to come up with more options so that when we got them priced, we could find out how much does curbside cost, how much does rear yard cost, how much does going less recycling, more recycling cost. We had a very good matrix that gave us a really helpful discussion. And I can tell you, walking around the neighborhood, people read that matrix because everybody wanted to talk about garbage. It was a very fascinating topic for about 3 weeks. I'm proud of that process, and it came up with options, and it gave the mayor and the board something to talk about. We looked hard. I think that what the questioner is asking about is we saved $108,000 just by choosing the low bid for the status quo, everything that was the same. We could have saved more by giving up rear yard pickup, which is to say letting everybody drag their garbage out to the street. We talked to a lot of people. I know the mayor has. I know the board members have. We got a lot of interest in saving money. We got a lot more interest in saying we don't want to give that up. And people were firm in saying we don't want to give up rear yard pickup. We listened. We talked. It's very tempting because it's $160,000. And so I think one thing we learned is we should go back to this in a year, perhaps 2 years when the contract is up, and see if the mood has changed in this village, because $160,000 is a lot of money, and I'd be willing if there was residential support for that to consider that. But we weren't going to go against residential opinion that was as firm as it was when we went out and talked to people this past month.
I do. In terms of, so a few things Joe just said. First, he said that he worked with just the village administrator on the options before the RFP went out. Just one person on that is probably not best practice. Really good public discussion. The results of the RFP were put on a PDF 1 hour before the meeting took place. 1 hour. Okay? So there was no way to get that information in advance of the meeting and to affect any of the discussion that took place in the 2 weeks up to the meeting. Lastly, there were creative suggestions that are out there that really didn't enter into the realm of all this, one of which that I mentioned at the very beginning that wasn't allowed to enter into this. There was really more that could have been done. It wasn't enough. All right? And please, it's really sort of almost the worst case of there was lots more involvement in this thing. There could have been more solicitation of our existing contractor, more solicitation of R&S to get more information about what new things that they were doing, to clean things up, to improve things on the edges and cut costs and everything else like that. I think one of the biggest benefits that's come across already that wasn't researched prior to the garbage contract was the size of the truck that goes down Fifth Avenue right now to pick up the merchant's garbage. It is much smaller and it clears up all of the drain that's going on the on Fifth Avenue during the day. That wasn't even discussed beforehand. So there is so much more that could have been done with this, and so much extra money that likely could have been saved without even getting into
Okay,
the curbside or not.
Methinks he protests too much.
Yeah.
He's,
hour
he's,
before.
he's complaining.
One hour.
David is complaining about two positive things. We saved $108,000 in the next year. Number one. Number two, if I understand him correctly, he is complaining that the garbage contractor that we chose has more appropriate trucks that fit downtown.
Okay.
I'm not sure that there's a problem there.
It sounds
You
like.
didn't know it going into
sounds
it.
like
It
a whole meeting.
happened to happen afterwards.
Okay,
I'd like to just have an opportunity. I think what we realized when we were at that meeting, I know I was sitting there chomping at the bit, and I know David jumped up and spoke at that meeting, but I think what we're seeing here is there was a lot of opportunity for community input, and the time for that would have been in developing the RFP, which would have been back in July, when I believe you first said you were going to do it, and I think you started doing it in January. So I think that it's a really important process. I think we really do need to have community involvement for something that big that can affect all of us that much and save us all that much money, and it needs to happen months ahead, 6 months ahead, not weeks ahead.
okay.
Next
On to
question.
the next question. This is from Peter Weiss at WIES at 230 Ancor Avenue. Okay. You want to give, and this is to Adam Kagan. You want to give responsibility of the Pelham Heights water supply to United Water. Why is that a good idea? And don't we want to keep that for ourselves?
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. It's an excellent question. We have an 80-year-old system. There are pipes that have been there since 1934. There are looming liabilities for repair. The systems don't last forever. We should get rid of that if we can. It frees up village staff. We spend a lot of village staff time maintaining, reading the meters. Reading the meters takes one person 40 days a year. That's how much time we spend reading meters. We have someone who spends 25% of their job just doing billing. So water billing, meter reading, and fixing the leaks in an 80-year-old system. Those are things that someone like United Water already does more efficiently than we ever could. Another reason we should do this is because it does provide property tax income for the buried pipes that are there. The utilities pay property tax on the value of the pipes that are buried there. Right now, the village doesn't pay property tax on its own pipes. And lastly, it removes redundant fees and other things like testing, so that should lower water rates for Heights residents. And I think that is probably my biggest reason.
Okay.
David, Jean, do you want to comment on this?
Living in Pelham Heights, I want to say thank you, Adam, for all your work on it.
Okay. Next question. This is from Laura Morris, 21 Fifth Avenue. And question,
Wait, to Kagan.
and this is to Kagan and Marty. Question, have we made use of the new salt storage shed, part of the new DPW yard this year?
I want to start with this one because I was shocked at one of the last bills that we saw. I think it was $20,000 for 750 tons of salt. So that's what that shed was holding. 750 tons of salt, to me, is an unfathomable amount of salt. I mean, until you stand out there and see how big that is, you don't realize how much salt that gets used to make sure that the streets are clean and clear. When you drive over the border to another community, you really notice the difference. So, sorry.
I know perhaps one thing about the salt shed, and that is because it's there, and because, well, I know two things. Number one, it doesn't pollute. That was a big deal for building this. It doesn't drip salt into the Hutchinson River, which is a very, very important thing. And two, it's big. It allows us to buy salt in bulk. And I can say that because of how smart our street foreman was, he was able to buy in bulk. And I believe we were tapped to supply salt to our neighboring sister village. So it has both saved us money and put us in good stead during the storms.
Does anyone else have more questions? Because I'm running low.
If you have a question, just put your card in there and Peter will grab it.
You can go back to mine, I got 4 of them on there.
No, but I'm happy to let other people.
Okay. This is from Khadija Musa. Do I have that right? Okay, 45 young, and it's for Mr. Ream. Why will the public-private experience you say you have be helpful on the board?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kadisha. I hope it's helpful in a number of different ways. This is a small village. I mean, what I get to work on at a national level in economic policy is fun and interesting to me, but we need to make sure it's always relevant to what we're dealing with here as neighbors. The work I've done has been a combination of both business experience and financing entrepreneurs, as well as working in economic policy around how not only state and municipal level governments, but also the federal level government works in encouraging innovation, encouraging employment, encouraging investment. What I think is especially important to pay attention is how we understand how this budget is built. And that's a big part of where I spend my time, not only on private sector budgets, but also understanding where they touch public sector budgets. They're very complex. They're often, from an accounting point of view, structured differently. A trusteeship is something that most citizens, all citizens, should have an opportunity to try to do, but it's especially helpful when some bring some more experience around budgeting. That's a big issue for us. Ours is, in fact, a $14 million budget, not 13. Understanding how we apply debt appropriately, not excessively, is part of understanding the value from both public sector and private sector. These are the things I want to bring. In addition, I just very briefly, one of my roles in my work is managing the fund of funds for New York State. I want to encourage those venture funds that are investing around the state to look at Westchester County and hopefully look at Pelham as well. It's not for me to decide where they spend the money, but I do understand how that level can also relate to making us smarter here as a village.
Okay.
Okay, this is a question for those three.
Okay. First of all, this is from John R. Cresoni at 312 7th Avenue. And it's to Mr. Ream, Ms. Polito, and Mr. Brown. And question, Governor Cuomo has requested that municipalities consolidate dues to reduce taxes. How would you go about to accommodate Cuomo's request? And let's start with this way, okay? So we'll go to.
I think that the village has started in some very good places. I think the village has talked to the manor about merging some different, about sharing some services, and I think that that's a great step, and I think that we need to just keep talking to our sister village and the others as well. David, you take that.
Okay.
All right, John, you spoiled my big finish, but here goes. This is what you're talking about. February 26th, announced by Governor Cuomo, a two-pronged property tax freeze. In this coming year, 2014-15, if you stay under the tax cap, if your municipality stays under the tax cap, then you, if your income is below $500,000, have a chance of actually receiving a 1.6% rebate if that's the case. To keep it going in the 3 years following, there has to be this shared, I wrote it down to make sure I had it right. Stay within the tax cap, develop a plan for sharing or consolidating services that generate savings equal to 3% of the tax levy for the subsequent 3 years. This is what you're talking about. Introduced right after New Year's, February 26th, this is the formal rollout. there is a website, cutpropertytaxes.ny.gov, that all of us can go to and say we support this. So that's what that is. What I would say is that it gets back to the point made originally, which is it's unfortunately about the here and now. And the first step for all this is to stay under the tax cap this year. And what that's really going to require is a fresh set of eyes on everything. It's great that these guys have experience doing it, but might be there are certain items that have seen this, done that, sort of like all the creative ideas have been burnt out. Maybe it's going to take something new to look at it with sort of a fresh perspective on it. And it's one of the reasons Jane and I are running on this whole thing. And then to follow up with that, we have got 1 year, and Pelham Manor has got 1 year to get into this shared services thing so that all of our residents can get this tax cap and help with all of our home values and home resales down the road. If we don't choose to be a tax cap, a couple of villages, we will feel the consequences.
Yeah, this speaks to everything we've been talking about before with shared services, but more importantly, the pressures we face as a village are changing. A lot of the things we did over the last decade to control our costs, we can't keep doing. A big part of what the governor's dealing with is the reality that the state pension pressures are continuing to mount on villages. Villages are the lowest level of the population base, then towns and cities in New York State. And so it is both convenient at the governor's level to talk about collapsing and consolidating villages into townships level where they see some natural efficiencies. These are the natural efficiencies we've all talked about saying we have to get to shared services. Whether or not our sister village shares some of the same excitement for it as we do is another matter. This helps bring some of that excitement. It also brings some real challenges too, because at the same time, the same pension pressures are on, and requiring a tax cap and then requiring villages to almost force feed their consolidation is going to create a lot of noise and a lot of strain. To believe that we're not going to hear about this a lot in the next year and not have a lot of pressures on what it means for our services is going to make us all upset. This is a time for us to be active citizens and pay attention to what's going on. Again, the pension pressures, a consolidation requirement, these are things that we need to start thinking about, and yes, they are both now, here and now, as well as they're going to take 4 or 5 years to turn the ship around. But I think we're also going to be listening a lot, or hearing a lot from the governor's office about just how these different competing requirements are all going to crash into each other.
Okay.
Okay, this is the second question.
Okay, I think we're ready for some second questions from people who asked questions already. This is from Robert Keller at 245 Wolf's Lane. Okay. And candidate Brown, what is your view on the Carroll Avenue?
Answer that.
Answer that. That must be the other side. And this is for candidate Ippolito. What is your view on how tenants were treated by the what is your view on how tenants were treated by the past administration of which both Trustee Kagan and Marty were a part?
I know we've spoken some, Bob, and I've had an opportunity to speak with some of the other tenants in the village. And they are strapped. They're completely strapped, a lot of them. Parking is one of the biggest issues facing those tenants who happen to be a large portion of the village. And any incremental change in how much their parking costs is very difficult. And they've all been very appreciative of the current mayor and the new trustees who came in and really insisted upon lowering the parking rates so that more people could park closer to where they live.
Okay, is there any?
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, you know what the
Yes.
vote was on the change in the parking? It was 7-0. So it's not exactly accurate to characterize it. It's just the new candidates, because we all
Okay.
voted for it.
But you raised it the year before. You raised it $50 the year before.
Okay, I think we're ready for the,
Okay, this looks like, oh, wait a minute.
Okay. Pamela
Sloan.
Sloan.
I can't read.
Okay, Pamela's, we could blame people's handwriting, but we won't. I mean, this is clear.
Don't blame
Pamela, it was, it's not bad. It's really, Pamela Sloan, 110, this I can't read, it must be Highbrook. Okay, okay. And this is for Jean and Dan. You are critical of the work of trustees Kagan and Marty during their tenure as trustee. Do you hear the same criticism? Do you share the same? Do you have the same criticisms that those with whom they serve on the boards? Mayor Cassidy, Trustee Volpe, Trustee Muti, and Trustee Synergia. Why or why not?
My feeling is that definitely I have been disappointed in some of the things that have occurred over the past year, one of which is the whole node situation. I really feel that the board, everybody dropped the ball on that one. I really feel like what should have happened is as soon as it was identified where those were going to go, those people should have been notified. I've read through all the minutes of the meetings, and I could tell that the board discussing it knew where those nodes were going to be. But it never said where it was. It was never in the paper exactly where they were going to be. And I feel like what should have happened is somebody should have physically gone and talked to those people and said, look, there is a material change being made to your neighborhood. This is what's happening. You need to know. And nobody on the board did that. Nobody. And I think that was wrong.
Okay, and do you want to add to that?
I'm critical over the choice of the DPW decrepit yard affecting 17 employees versus flooding on 7th Avenue affecting hundreds of residents. I'm critical of new fire trucks over refurbished fire trucks in Pelham Manor that famously saved $500,000. On that issue in particular, I was roundly ignored with suggesting, don't do it, take a break, step back, think before you act, see what other options are out there, and was roundly ignored. That I'm critical of. I'm critical of what happened with the garbage contract renewal when we were promised at the first meeting by one of the sitting trustees that there would be ample time for the public to review and weigh in. I'm critical on the fact that the RFP process was supposed to have started in the fall, only started this year. And again, we're just talking about all these $20,000 and $30,000 of savings. If there was another $20,000 or $30,000 of expenditures, if there was that amount of incremental savings from the garbage contract available, it should have been worked on to the absolute last possible minute and started early enough. So that happened. So I'm critical of what's happened in the past, Joe, in particular, and I think you and I've talked about this in the past, particularly the fire truck thing. There was a whole bunch of people that were irate over this whole thing. While Pelham Manor gets massive publicity from the fire truck company for refurbishing and not spending $500,000. Yes, we had grants, I understand, but we still spent more money, okay? And then so secondly, this is the follow-up to it. So for that, the whole process this year on the garbage contract, yes, I'm critical of everybody too.
Okay, is there anything you want to clarify?
No,
Okay,
I think
yeah,
we'll go
that's
on to
clear.
this one.
Okay.
Matthew Kaplan.
This is Matthew Kaplan,
Matthew Kaplan.
203 Cliff Avenue. Question. The board,
Question 4.
okay, this is for Adam Kagan and David Brown. Question. The board has discussed the pervasive problem of speeding along residential streets. Given this problem and the seeming proliferation of other minor infractions, such as graffiti, what steps would you take to rein in these problems? Which one of you, would one of you like to answer first? Okay,
I think we're going to say the same thing.
I'll
Okay.
defer to the gentleman with the tie.
okay.
And I'd like to defer to the gentleman with the jacket. But
Okay, I'm
I think
gonna
what we
make
both
this-
say is, okay, let's just dial up the police patrols, give out lots of tickets, make revenue, and get people to slow down. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's like these are one of the classic sort of social issues that works its way through the neighborhood, through the village, and it's going to be some combination of, more severe police work to really, make sure that this kind of thing happens, and also raising the awareness and the communication out there in the public that there's some real issues going on. One of the solutions to downtown that other towns have adopted are these sort of bike paths to get people to come to downtown that don't have parking spaces. Sort of an awareness of what's going on with this speeding, putting share the road arrows into the road for bicyclists that might hopefully wake some drivers up to slow down. Those are some alternate ideas.
Okay. And
Thank you, Matt, for asking that question. The reason that I got started with the village board to begin with was when I was a new resident, I came before the board, before former Mayor Hotchkiss, and said, I want a speed bump on my street. And I petitioned all my neighbors, and we thought it was a great idea. And then it didn't happen, and I realized, and I learned from that, and the reason it didn't happen was because there's a way these things go. Everyone wants one. I've learned since being on the board, and there's a way that these things are studied. They come out, you ask for one, someone comes out and does a traffic study, and they determine is there enough traffic, and is the traffic moving fast enough to determine whether you get a speed bump or not. So I learned from doing that the first time that everyone wants one, and they don't always qualify. And they may not be the best traffic calming device for the particular situation. They also, I don't think people realize that if you stand outside, they make noise. Whenever cars go over them, they make noise. So you don't really necessarily want one in front of your house, which was exactly where I mistakenly thought it should be. But with regard to the traffic calming, I believe it's around behind the school especially is a problem. I witness it all the time because I see people go past there at a much higher rate of speed than they should. There is a traffic control device there. There is a crossing guard there. But still, people seem to not realize they come upon a school so quickly. There are all the signs that are there that are required by the state that there's a warning. But we don't, if there's another idea that we haven't tried, perhaps we should try it. But we've done the easy things like speed bumps and signs. But I agree with Mr. Brown on this point that perhaps a bike lane or something else might be worth a try.
Okay, I think that I think it's time to wrap it up. I think everyone has had an opportunity to ask the questions that they want. And I think this has been a great exercise in democracy. And I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to point out that this... Oh, I'm sorry. Closing statement. And we're going to go backward on this. We're going to start with Mr. Kagan, and then with Mr. Brown, and then Mr. Ream, and Mr. Marty, and Ms. Polito. So, Adam Kagan.
Thank you. As you've heard here tonight, the candidates are not far apart on any of these issues. It's a small village, and we all share the same concerns about services and growth and taxes. But I believe that the village board should reflect the community that it represents. We don't all live near the train, and we don't all, and some of us have lived in other communities in the last 20 years. By now, we've probably all knocked on your door, or called your phone, or shook your hand somewhere during this campaign. As incumbents, Joe and I have the additional benefit of re-election campaigning is that we get reinforcement about what matters to our constituents. Throughout this campaign, we've been consistent in our message. We want to slow the growth of village taxes. We want to maintain the quality of services. And we want to make sure that we encourage differing perspectives. Joe, Chris, and I want to continue an independent and bipartisan approach to the board by engaging the community and seeking out alternative solutions. The current mayor and his colleagues now hold a majority of board seats. Adding our opponents to the board would make this a 6-to-1 board, further diminishing dissenting viewpoints. Adam and, sorry, that's me. Look at that. You shouldn't have written it for me. Joe and I have offered alternative views on the board this past year, and Chris would offer ongoing independent views and broader perspectives through a bipartisan approach to solving village problems. Lastly, please, please, please don't let voter turnout suffer. If you don't exercise your right to vote for the best qualified candidates, local elections become popularity contests. Gene and Dave are neighbors and should be applauded for throwing their hat into the ring. But please don't just vote for someone because your kids go to school together. look into what people say and look into what they stand for. So please use your vote to maintain differing viewpoints from thoughtful, hardworking, and experienced members of the board and this community who aren't afraid to ask the tough questions and are patient enough to seek out the best answers.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think you understand that you have 2 minutes for the closing statements. And next would be David Brown.
Adam addressed the same thing I was going to address, which is this feeling that Gene and I would represent not independent views. I would say this from tonight's debate. I think you can see that our views are quite independent, and Gene and I think of ourselves as nonpartisan, not bipartisan. And just to point that out to everybody, I think it's really important to understand. It is trying to get the village moving ahead for all of these difficult challenges ahead of us as much as possible. I think that what really is required, perhaps, for some of these sitting trustees is a little bit of fresher energy, like we've talked about, and more creative ideas, and some new entrants into the process that take place. A huge amount of the work goes on between the meetings, not during the meetings. The amount of work that you do in preparing your case for whatever project you're taking on, for opposing somebody's viewpoint for what their project taking on, it's that buildup in between meetings that takes place that perhaps a fresh set of eyes and a whole new level of energy is really what is required. And it's really one of the main reasons Gene and I are running. Last, please, didn't get a chance to talk about it tonight, but focus for me will also be on any sort of environmental or sustainability issues that the village can try to adopt going forward as well. But thanks to everybody for coming here tonight and for voting a week from tomorrow, and for all of you that put the debate on. Thanks.
Thank you. Christopher?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would hope that tonight's debate strengthens your overall interest in the issues that the board has to deal with here in the village. The takeaway should very much be that you're more motivated as citizens to be involved. This is very much what everyone says they want, more public dialogue, but it is a two-way street. We want people to be engaged and interested in these issues. Some of them are very mundane and complex and technical, but they still affect your local lives. It's clear that there are many different ways to look at these issues, and we should always celebrate the contest for ideas. We need it always on the board. We should never run away from it, and that's how the village gets to its best decisions. We have very thoughtful and dedicated opposing candidates in Mr. Brown and Mr. Polito. But tonight is also very much about deciding who can best deliver on the increasing pressures that are coming down on us as a village. I believe confidently that Joe, Adam, and I are absolutely the best suited to work with the current administration, with their strengths, with their views, to see all sides of an issue, and to make sure that all sides, all parts of Pelham, are properly represented. I've had great fun knocking on a lot of doors. Again, like I said, twice now. What a warming experience it is to hear people say, hey, I appreciate you trying to serve, or here's what I care about. This isn't to be anything other than the fact that you talk to people, you get to know them. This is a small village. I would hate not knowing people at the store. What a great opportunity, and I really hope others get to go do it in the future as well. I believe the big difference here in this election is about priorities. I am very much focused on the future of Pelham, what it's going to take 10 years from now to continue to maintain what we love about Pelham the way it is now. That takes both thinking now and how that affects thinking into the future. You also have 3 votes to use next Tuesday, and no one should tell you not to use all of them in the way you see fit. I highly ask that you do. I am very proud to stand with Joe and Adam because I know that their technical expertise has made a meaningful, essential difference in the progress of this current administration over the last year. I ask you to support them and me when you vote next Tuesday.
Thanks.
Okay, Joe Marty.
Thank you. I've enjoyed working on the board for the last 4 years. I like being methodical and I like being prepared. I've been one of the most active board members over the past 4 years, and I truly enjoy the sort of work we do here. I like living in Pelham, and I like giving back to the community that is just an amazing place to live in. The past year, under Mayor Cassidy, it's sometimes felt like there's been 4 people ruling, doing projects, and working, and I think the 3 of us have felt a little bit on the outside. I think over time that's lessened. I've an okay relationship with the mayor, but I think it's still 4-3, and I feel like one of the last things we probably want to do is make that ratio 6-1. And you can decide how much or how little the group that caucused with, ran with, is supported by the Republican Party is going to be separate from the Republican Party. But I think 6-1 still adds up to 6-1. I think we want more balance on the board, and it doesn't mean that the people that I'm referring to, either the current board or the people to my right, are anything other than well-meaning residents of Pelham. But I think numbers mean something. Finally, I mean, I would like another 2 years to do a couple of important things that I've worked on or I'd like to complete. The first is I'm really excited about what the governor has done in setting up an incentive for villages to share services. It's great. The tax cap alone was tough, but it made us be forceful. And I've known from my brief period working with the fire department, it's a lot easier to negotiate wages with the fire and police, et cetera, when you have a tax cap. It's a good thing. We embrace that. Now, with the governor's incentives to share services, that is a home run. It's going to be hard, but I think it may make our neighbors a little bit more willing to do this. Second, I'm excited about doing some of the zoning ideas that I talked about before, including, Laura Morris, I forgot to say, taking a look at the model zoning code. So thanks to Maggie and Ina for putting this on, and thanks for letting me serve on the board.
Okay. And finally, Jean.
Thank you for coming this evening. And this is not my usual venue. I'm a very earnest, hard worker behind the scenes. And I view serving in village government as another level of community service, not a political venture. As such, I believe that to truly affect change, it is important to represent the varied views of our neighbors and not rely on a partisan rhetoric to guide the debate of the issues. Pelham is a special place. We are fortunate that many of our DPW, police, and firefighters call this their home. They provide a priceless service, and the fact that we all raise our families together is one thing that makes this a safe and close-knit community. We are all equally invested in Pelham. The issues facing our village will not be solved with a quick fix, but rather thoughtful research and reliance on the valuable insights of members of our community. In 2007, increased enrollment had reached the point that Colonial School simply could not hold any more students. Despite a principal who historically did not feel comfortable advocating for her students, I spoke out. I recognized that the 2 portable classrooms being offered were not a long-term solution. Using my training as an architect, I guided a community-driven process that resulted in a new plan. It created more class space, was sympathetic to the neighborhood, and preserved the playground. The same process I employed with Colonial School, from sketch to final brick, is how I would have developed approach to downtown, and indeed how I would look at dealing with taxes. This is the same procedure in terms of developing for downtown that was used in Marbury Corners. If elected trustee, I would tap into the energy of Pelham residents who want to make a difference in the town they love. I value hard work over partisan politics, and I hope you'll all vote for Dave and I on March 18th, based upon our concrete records and independent voice.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for everybody who came out tonight to ask questions. I want to point out that this is, of course, videotaped, and that you will be able to see it in the days before the March 18th election. It'll be shown on Cablevision Channel 75 and Verizon Fios 43. So if you have heard this, you want to hear it again, and if you let your neighbors know about, friends and neighbors know about it. And thank you
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we take it back?